Okay, it's Sunday, so let's raise our cup of cafe con leche. Ah, that's for the internet lag for the Instagram. I hope you guys had a fantastic July 4th with the remembrance that we are celebrating Independence Day, where we are nearly 250 years from our breaking away from a monarch and by having a bunch of millionaires in their own time writing up laws for everybody years later, with a monarch possibly rising up to the throne, and God knows what else is happening. But let's discuss that in the rotation. In my soul, you're a corner in my heart.
Solid cold open, Gary.
They're really poor founding fathers. They were all pretty wealthy, even though they pretty much stole their land. But the fact is, that's who was running the country at the time. That's who was writing the laws, and they were actually kind of writing it to maintain their status quo. Right. They wanted to keep the social order as it was, with them being the landowners and everybody being the fiefdom. I'm not even certain they even wanted anybody to vote, but boy, how surprising that is 250 years later, practically. Yeah, but here we are. We're still fighting for our freedoms.
I saw a meme the other day that showed their ages, and like at the time, Thomas Jefferson was like in his early 30s. I think Ben Franklin was the oldest, being in his 80s or whatnot. So if you really think about it, a lot of the founding fathers, even James Monroe was like 18 at the time.
He was 80. Benjamin Franklin was 80. That's old.
Yeah, but he was a healthy 80. He had 3 side chicks, in multiple countries.
Oh, geez.
Mostly France.
A lot of health issues too. Like he was known to always have a gout or something.
Everybody had gout then. It was popular.
I didn't even know people lived till their 80s back then. I thought you died when you were 25 and got
That's why these guys were starting a revolution. They were like, "Oh man, I'm halfway through my life. We got to do something about this." They want to pay 2% on taxes on tea.
Yeah, a lot of the founding fathers, several of them died of dysentery.
Right, that's true.
So isn't it great we have cancer now instead? But that was because of the fact that we had hemp in our lives at that point in time. Everybody, I don't know how much they were eating it then. They were mostly using it for industrial use, but nowadays they had taken hemp out of the feed, and people did not become as healthy as they are. We're trying to fight back. We're always trying to fight back, and that is why I think it's so important that we have warriors on our side to continue moving things forward. And for those who don't know, I don't know, Chris, do you have a graphic up ready
for
Kathy?
Oh yeah. Well, it's not a graphic. It's like a video. You want me to play the video? I have a whole thing playing, as a matter of fact. I'll just do it. Okay, here's my little video montage for Kathy. And yes, right now we are known as
that is so Hallmark.
It was a template that I messed around with, but this is a very personalized effect for Kathy. We have been friends with Kathy for quite some time, and we actually, before we were Suncoast Normal, we were known as Central Florida Normal, which is for some reason I think a nerdier name, but Kathy came to one of our biggest events called the Spliff back then, and she hit what was at the time known as our world famous blunt. And here you go.
Well, do you love that Mary Jane? Make some noise if you love that girl. Oh, come on, tell me, do you think you love that Mary Jane? I think I do. You know why? Because I smoke 2 joints in the morning, I smoke 2 joints in the night, I I smoke 2 joints in the afternoon. It make a Rasta man feel alright. I smoke 2 joints in a time of peace. Smoke 2 joints and watch the
During time of
war.
war.
I smoke 2 joints before I smoke 2 joints. I think I need to smoke 2 more.
So if so, we could give you some context and of what's going on. I'm sure. So Kathy Jordan was the very famous patron saint of medical cannabis. Oh, geez, what's happening in the background? Oh, okay. And she had ALS and recently died.
Oh,
And you know, she is very important to all of us. Inspired most of us to in doing what we do. And yeah, that was a little video. I think Gary thought I just had like a picture of her to put up, but I did a little bit of creative stuff this morning, and that
that's
was
very
my
sweet.
video montage to her.
So you salivated the situation is basically what you're saying. Yeah, Kathy was an amazing person. She was one of the two women that gave me the reason to do what I'm doing right now. One of which
Mm,
was my wife who had glaucoma, and
right.
this lady here who I was walking down the hallways in Tallahassee, and I saw several state senators and basically running very very fast in the opposite direction, and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and they saw her coming down the hallway in this motorized wheelchair. I'm thinking, what in the world could possibly make them want to run in the opposite direction? These somewhat obese and and elderly men. And I bet I bumped into Dennis Baxley, who I later became friends with, kind of, and I found out that they just didn't want to talk to her because
Mm,
she was such a figure. Here is somebody who was okay. Get this: she was born right in January 1st, a few minutes after midnight in 1950, the exact midpoint of the century. And then in 1986, she was diagnosed with ALS, said she would not live to 1991, discovered Florida cannabis in 1989, and suddenly noticed that her ALS was subsiding. So when
mm,
she started using that, she started recovering from it. But those first 3 years took their toll on their body. But she was able to hold on for all those years until she dies in 2024 at 4:20 on July 4th, Independence Day. There's a lot of uh, coincidences there and serendipity, I know, but that was Kathy. I think she timed everything,
mm.
literally too. But she was one of the longest living ALS patients in the country. And another interesting point, Anna, she was a hairdresser for Joe Biden's first wife
No
in
way.
Castleberry, Delaware. Yeah,
That's
she lived in
crazy.
Castleberry, Delaware, and Joe was her senator. In fact,
That's wild.
she used to do the hair for his staff as well. He would come in and he'd senator do that so long. This has all been going on. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about Kathy because, like I said, she was an amazing person. She was the one who was used as a plaintiff in the case that eventually got us the got smokable adult use cannabis. She
Amazing.
was uh, John Morgan's candidate for that, and so and Jeff Clemens actually chimed in and said some nice stuff too on the web as far as that because his first cannabis bill was the Kathy Jordan bill.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So that is wonderful. And here we are. We got to talk about the other warriors we have now. One of them is right below me right here. Anna, who I met when she was still working for Planned Parenthood at a USF parent thing,
That's right.
and
Thank
and it was you, not Ida, right? Because you do guys switch every once in a while, and you kind of really screw me up.
God. Yes, I do have a twin sister who used to be the
She
legislator
has a
Carlos Smith, so she's been involved in the process too.
down to the same laugh, which is really ironic. But that's besides the point. My name is Gary Stein. I'm your political director here at Suncoast Normal, and our master of public health. Oh, pause button.
I pressed
I'll go on.
Your internet, Gary. I swear.
Yeah, my internet. I tell you, I blame Blaze. Work, and down below me and off to the right, we have our deputy director, our master of business administration, and our pseudo Cuban, no, actual Cuban, kind of,
Pseudo Cuban.
Carlos Angel Armida.
Just because I don't speak Spanish fluently doesn't mean I'm not Cuban.
Amen, honey.
That's true.
Amen.
Yeah.
But you don't always bring the colada, you know. And above that, of course, is our executive director coming to us from beautiful Anne Arundel County in Maryland, which is above the Beltway where he hits them below the Beltway. Chris Kano.
Gary, remind me if I'm ever in witness protection not to tell you where I'm at.
Oh, you got doxxed a long time ago, my friend.
I like to read that you guys are now like pausing the show to read my little dumb things.
Absolutely. And down below me, of course, we have the representative for District 42, right?
That's right, 42.
I got it right. This early in the morning, and I still get that. Out and about around Orlando is Anna Eskamani. Anna, how are we doing today over there in the middle of the state, which should have been the capital, but is not?
Amen to that. It's going good. Been a busy holiday weekend. It's sunny, it's hot, but we are out knocking on doors, using this time to catch up with work. And so just getting ready for another long week tomorrow.
So do you have a primary candidate?
No, I don't have Yeah, no one in August, but I do have November.
So you're ready for the general. That should be an interesting time.
Oh, yes. Well, and I know we have many exciting ballot initiatives as well, including Amendment 3. So good things to come in November.
Okay, well, first question, if I may, how do you stand on Amendment 3?
Well, I fully support it and plan to vote yes. I do think that there are some very important concerns from members of the public around who's going to be able to actually sell recreational cannabis. And personally, I really think folks should be able to grow at home. And so I know it obviously doesn't allow for that. The legislature can, put into place laws that could expand implementation. The amendment does give room for that. But I think when it comes to the pathway of decriminalization, the pathway to just normalizing access to cannabis, of course, with safety precautions around, adult usage. But overall, you have to circumvent the legislature to get this done, because as we all know, Tallahassee is moving backwards on these issues. And we were able to get a veto, on the hemp bill this past session, which was great. But at the end of the day, the legislature has continued to demonstrate just kind of a regressive perspective on this issue. And so you have to get around them through a ballot initiative, much like we did with medicinal cannabis.
Well, I have my own opinion as to why the governor did that veto. I don't think he did it out of the goodness of his heart or his belief in hemp. I think it's totally, as Senator Brandon said, a strategic move and not a policy move. Basically giving the hemp industry one extra year to fight Amendment 3, which is what's happening right now. A lot of people in the hemp industry are seeing it as an infringement possibly on their own livelihoods.
Right.
Well, I think it's very important for the hemp industry to hear this, especially from you, Anna, because you were absolutely instrumental in fighting the hemp bill in the legislature. And I mean, we were almost successful in knocking it down in the House.
Right.
But a lot of what's going on, I don't know if you remember my face from any public comments. I
do.
But,
I can't forget your face in the middle of the night. It's just there.
But being part of the hemp industry and being for Amendment 3, we're hearing a lot of backlash from people saying to vote no on 3 because this comes from Trulieve. And because we went through so much shit fighting the fucking hemp bill.
Right.
So, So, why do you think it's so important that we vote yes on 3?
Well, there's a lot of important reasons to vote yes on 3. I mean, I think when it just comes to a trying to move forward away from the criminalization of cannabis, and obviously there's no expungement language in this policy, in this ballot initiative, but it can lead to that in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about just all the harms caused by mass incarceration, predominantly in low income and Black and brown communities because of cannabis possession, and these, war on drugs mentality that has not made anyone more safe and has not addressed addiction, we need to pursue policies that can put us in a position of just social equality. And Amendment 3 can truly help us get there. I agree with the concerns around monopolies because, we all know that Trulieve is the biggest funder of this, and there's a financial incentive to do that. But the language does give the legislature authority to craft additional policies. And I know with the current makeup of the legislature, that's highly unlikely. I also know that with the influence of corporations on the legislative process, that allows there to be captured economies and so forth. But at this point, Amendment 3 brings us a step closer to the progress that we are imagining for our communities. And I don't foresee another ballot initiative having a path to success, mainly because they do cost a lot of money. I mean, it's a sad reality, but I remember in 2010, when I was a UCF student, I was helping to collect petitions for a constitutional ballot initiative for environmental conservation. And back then, you could have a volunteer-driven campaign for ballot initiatives. It was not that expensive. The path was tangible by volunteers, and we were successful in doing so. But in the last 10, 12 years, the legislature has put so many barriers in place that have even made ballot issues expensive. And there actually has been some commentary that the gambling initiative from a few cycles ago inflated the cost of ballot initiatives. So whether it's the cost of canvassers, the cost of really labor is the biggest expense, but you can't lead these initiatives without hiring people and without hiring paid canvassers. The same thing for Amendment 4 on the abortion initiative. Yes, there was a huge volunteer footprint in that initiative, but there was also a very large paid canvass operation. So unless you have those types of resources, it's just hard for these initiatives to get through. And so I do think that when it comes to building that world that each one of us want to see, and also just opening up access to people who still don't have the resources to access medicinal cannabis as it is today, you really need to support Amendment 3. And so I find it, to be imperfect, of course, but at the same time, in a state like Florida, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. And so I feel like it is an important initiative for us to support and help break the stigma. By the way, one of the organizations against it is the Florida Chamber of Commerce, right? And so it's important to really think about, this from a larger vantage point where you have large corporations who are against it for different reasons. And so I do think that it's important for us to support it, but then don't lose sight of the advocacy that has to continue after its passage in the legislature, in our communities, and beyond.
That's really good to hear you say. And honestly, that's what it always comes down to. As much, that of all the reasons that you just listed out as to why we should support it, as much as I hate Trulieve, right? I just can't. I have to sleep at night. I have to, maybe my business, first off, the hemp bill is going to come back. It's going to come back next year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And second off, right, if I'm able to operate for 2 more years selling hemp the way I'm selling it now, and 50,000, whatever amount of people, what is it, Kano? There's a certain amount of people that are arrested every year.
Yeah.
50,000.
Yeah, and Florida has tens of thousands of marijuana arrests each and every year. And you got to think about Florida has the harshest, felony threshold in the entire country in a lot of ways, in that 20 grams or more will net you a felony punishable by up to 5 years and a $5,000 fine. Any amount of concentrate, whether that be hash or any other type of concentrate,
Vape pen, right? Like
yeah,
a vape
vape
pen.
pen is the same penalty. And so, what Amendment 3 clearly shows is that the possession limits will change in Florida to 3 ounces, which is not a crime, or less, and up to 5 grams of concentrate. That alone will end tens of thousands of arrests in this state. And as a consumer advocacy organization, we just can't miss this opportunity to end those arrests. If it's in a lot of ways, there are people who are going to make money off of this, like anything in this country. Money and politics are so intertwined now in the modern era. It is the way it is. But you got to follow where the money goes. Representative Eskamani hit it on the head. The implementation part of the amendment is where the legislature is going to wield the most power. And so people like herself can suggest things like, Carlos, you as a hemp business owner could be one of those other entities that could be licensed to sell retail cannabis. I mean, and I'm going to continue to press on that. We have tens of thousands of licensed hemp businesses in this state that are really good people, that are doing right, that are following regulations, that are clearly even being over-regulated and more regulated than the medical marijuana industry by the governor and his cronies, in the legislature, based on the legislation y'all have faced in the last couple of years. So, we have folks that are doing it right. I think you all, should be the first entities that get a crack at the medical marijuana industry. I mean, the adult use industry, since you've been closed out of the medical marijuana industry because of the vertical integration.
Right.
Now, let's be clear about the fact that the legislature has every opportunity within the framework of how this amendment is written to screw things up. No offense, but they tend to do that.
Make it worse or make it better, right?
Well, let's just talk about for just a second the bill that allowed ex-felons to get their vote back. I mean, look what they did to that. They made it so you had to be wealthy to be able to get your vote back. That's practically a poll tax.
Right.
Essentially, and that is what it did. As far as this amendment is concerned, they could just limit it to just the MMTCs, even though it says in there in some vague language that any other licenses that the legislature will allow. Well, they haven't even allowed the 22 licenses that were supposedly applied for over a year ago to go through, or even the one minority license, the Pigford license, to go through. So. And there's been 2 bills from the Senate in the last year to improve on the Pigford license to give 3 other people get licenses. Things happening because it's just a lot of smoke and mirrors sometimes, and so this will stop the arrests if you're in a private home or in a privately owned establishment that allows it. You can actually be arrested in your home if your landlord does not allow you to smoke in your home. So it could stop the arrests, or it could ramp them up, because if we have adult use, there may be more people who totally believe that they have public use. At this point in time, we would need the legislature to put in a public use bill. I'd be more than happy to write it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's why the advocacy can't stop, right? And Gary just outlined Amendment 4 from 2018 on rights restoration, where the legislature passed not an implementing bill, but an interference bill. And so that's always a risk involved in all of this. Now, of course, if the constitutional language is very clear, you could attempt to fight back in the courts, but it's just ever more important to make sure that the coalitions that were built in opposition to the hemp bill, for example, those coalitions need to be maintained, because the advocacy fights in legislature are not stopping. The hemp bill is very likely to come back. And if we do go into next session with Amendment 3 passed, then legislature is going to continue on a path of passing, potentially, as Gary is saying, interference legislation to make things more restrictive. But if we also can push back and have the right spokespeople advocating for common sense policies, then we can hopefully expand it to small businesses and not just feed into this monopoly structure, which we have in Florida today.
I mean, I hate to play devil's advocate, though. I just might be a little tired from going up to Tallahassee 2 years in a row for these hemp bills. But how likely is it that my hemp permit would become a license for a dispensary? I don't think it's very likely at all. I mean, for many of the reasons Gary just outlined, we haven't given out any licenses for medical. We've got just the 22. There's this whole thing about the Pickford license that's holding everything up. And, I've had to fight to not look like I'm selling drugs to kids for the past 2 years. So, it's as much as I want, the language is what the language is. We're right. You guys are right about what the language is. It does say other licensed entities, and it is possible for the legislator to treat this thing right. But, unfortunately, there's not a lot of legislators like Anna that have common sense towards this subject. How likely, like, what, maybe it's a better question to ask you, Anna, is like, how long would it take for for other people other than True Leave to make money off of Amendment 3?
Right. I mean, the
Like,
the reality, as you're outlining, is just the makeup of the legislature continues to be influenced by corporate greed, and whoever has
yeah,
the biggest checks that they write to lawmakers and politicians tend to get the policy they want. And so it's a reminder that this November, it's not just Amendment 3 on your ballot or Amendment 4 on your ballot, but it's also, of course, every state house representative
yeah,
and half of the state senate. And so I do think it's important for everyday people to make this an election topic, to ask your state representative candidates. And many people, to their credit, have asked me this question, which I really appreciate. But it's that accountability piece of, where do you stand on Amendment 3? And what would be your position on implementing legislation? Would you support small businesses in the hemp field being able to also become licensed? Would you support expanding more licenses to minority owned businesses? And we have to make this a topic on the campaign trail. All of us here know that the political commentary in this country is not only very polarizing, but it's focused often on culture war issues. It's focused on debates about immigration, and not so much talking about these very important small business issues, these very important economic issues, issues about monopolies, which, that's, for me, that's my love language, is trying to bust up monopolies and highlight how consolidation among corporations have made things harder for consumers and workers, for that matter. And so we need to really elevate this conversation and encourage folks who care about cannabis usage to get to know who their state candidates are and make this an election topic, and educate voters on, where do candidates stand, on these types of issues. I don't know if if that takes shape as like a candidate survey where information is posted on a public website where you can see how your candidates respond to some of these questions. But there definitely needs to be an opportunity for voters to have more exposure to their state representatives and senators, and then get them on the record for where they stand on these issues, and make that a voting topic. Make that a topic that gets people to either support you or not support you.
I'm actually one of those people who actually looks at all the judges that are up for a re-election or retainment,
Right.
and actually check out what their record was and how they think before I actually vote for them. Because most people just go either alphabetical or whatever. There's a lot of what I call Christmas tree voters. They'll say, "Okay, I'm a Democrat, so I'm going to vote out for all the Democrats," and then that's it. And then whatever amendment is concerned. And the Republicans, they always say, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line, and they basically just check off all the Republicans. So I'm not certain whether there's going to be a change in that or a twist in that. Whether the people who go to vote on liberal issues such as adult use and the abortion issue, well, whether they will change their down ballot menus. And we've got to break this supermajority right now, quite
Oh,
frankly.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and breaking the supermajority, as you know, Gary, it's just about bringing balance back to the force, right? Like, you just can't have a democracy when there's just one party rule all the time, regardless of where your political party is. It's like, there's no incentive to compromise when it's one party rule. So I definitely agree with your point on that. And I'll just add too, these issues don't always fall on party line. right? I mean, I've received so many emails from Republicans over this past session disappointed in their own party because of the hemp legislation. And so what's so unique about cannabis issues is that it really does transcend party lines. So what an opportunity to also not only inspire everyday people to get more civically engaged, but to kind of counter the polarization, right? By saying, hey, in this race, the Republicans bet on these issues, or in this race, the Democrats bet on these issues, right? And really try to show folks that it is possible to also not always look at things from a binary of red versus blue.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that every senator, everybody in the Senate voted up on the hemp bill, even the
Right.
Democrats.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Which, oh my God, it's so frustrating when I see that happen. But yeah, so
yeah.
true. And then in our case, we had some Republicans vote no with us, right? So
Right.
yeah, 100%.
Right. Like what's his name? Moody actually like presented an amendment that
Right.
that tried to bring up a viable compromise.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I think of lobbyists often kind of like that superhero, the Shadow. Only the Shadow knows what lives in the hearts of men. The fact is, the Shadow can't be seen, but he's always manipulating things. And I think a lot of it, what happened with the hemp bill in the Senate was they were given that line that all of the hemp products out there are unsafe, and we are protecting the welfare of your state if you vote this forward. And I think that the lobbyists were the ones who were whispering in their ears to tell them that. It certainly wasn't me. Certainly wasn't any of the hemp people who came up and spoke like Carlos.
Right.
I think it's yeah, but then you get bullshit like I'll call her out. Osgood, that's like saying that if you try a hemp product, you're gonna like end up smoking crack and eating out of a dumpster.
Right.
We
Right.
still have
A lot of misinformation.
people on the left in Florida that are severely misinformed on cannabis and hemp and what it'll do for you.
Yep.
Mhm.
Well, and I think the biggest indicator in a lot of this is
We should make
well, I was gonna say I haven't looked at this, but I'd be curious to see how much money the individual candidates, but also the party organizations have received from companies like True Leave, right? Because that's often like an indicator in some of this too. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, I think we already talked about this, but the money in politics does matter. It's a cliche of follow the money, but it always tells a story that sometimes isn't public facing when you see who writes checks to who, right? So that's the unfortunate reality of it. And it's rarely are the legislative fights Republicans versus Democrats. I feel like it's often people versus corporations, but corporations just have so much influence over the majority party, more than minority party, because they just see them as the ones who set the agenda, because they are. So they give more money to whoever sets the agenda. And I do, have this tension sometimes in my mind where I'm like, if Democrats were in charge on some of these more corporate issues, right, not social issues, how would we counter that corporate influence? Because again, the companies would just shift their giving. They would still give to both sides. They always give the majority more because the majority sets the agenda. So just a reminder, right, of like, for civic involvement and civic engagement, like you got to hold everyone accountable, and you also have to found ways to elect people that will counter the influence of money in politics. We need campaign finance reform desperately, because I do think our democracy is never going to fully function when money continues to be the main influencer of decisions. And until there's a shift, in that realm, or at least more transparency in the process of money in politics, it's gonna be very hard for
There
government.
really is no better example of what you're talking about than Florida cannabis.
Right.
At least in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
I'm certain almost any candidate who comes in office has some kind of agenda on their mind based on their personal beliefs, and what issues they want to champion. I'm actually expecting to see a lot more bills that are in favor of taking care of people with disabilities because Danny Perez is coming into the speakership, and just like Andy
He froze again.
Gardner for years. Disabled that year because that was his ASR for all these cultural issues, though. I mean, does Moms for Liberty have that much power that they can actually control them? We know that $40 million was put into this bill, and I'm certain that not all of it was just for getting petitions. A lot of it
Right.
was for swaying legislators and executive directors.
Right, right. Well, on the culture war fights, so much of that's driven by these right-wing think tanks that also realize that when you distract people with social issues, they lose sight of the economic issues. They lose sight of corporate consolidation and losing their labor rights and so forth. So at the end of the day, so much what happens in Tallahassee, it's also a deflection and distraction because then all the media attention goes to the culture war battles, right? And you forget, oh, they're also passing predatory loan programs and they're, making it harder for small businesses to survive and they're forcing children to go to work and right. So at the end of the day, like you got to fight both battles in my world, but you never can lose sight of the economic issues because that's really what matters to voters more than anything else too. Is can I pay my bills on time? Are my kids gonna inherit a world where they're going to be successful? Is my small business going to survive this economy? So it's so important, to never get distracted by that kind of stuff. You have to fight back for the good of your community, but always pivot back to things like property insurance, right? Which is out of control in Florida and does not get the attention it deserves compared to the hours we spend debating manufactured problems like diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Which has continued to become the boogeyman of the right.
And when you have distraction, you can do things like what happened with the arts and culture funding this last session, where it was decimated, it was zeroed out
Right.
in most instances. And when we asked Senator Brandis about it last week, he said, "Well, the grant well, so to speak, was dry because we didn't have any money left in there." Well, why is it? Because they put it into the cultural war issues.
Right.
If that was indeed the case. I mean, they're still talking about the fact that you got to watch out for the arts and cultures because that's where all the pornography gets in. Oh,
Ah,
absolutely.
my God, I know it's so crazy.
Well,
And
they're going after the Fringe Festival there, I think.
yeah, and that's another huge loss for the economy because every dollar we put into arts and culture, it generates $9 in economic growth for that local economy. So another example, right, of when you govern by culture wars, you make some really bad decisions that impact all of our lives. So it's definitely so important for us to again push back against that but not lose sight of these economic issues and these small business issues because that really is what's going to drive collective prosperity into the future.
We have a lot of legislators on the show, and you can really tell the difference between an uneducated legislator and an educated legislator, because sometimes we have to like control the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, we have to say, so here's what we're going to talk about, and here's the problems we got with it, legislative person. And you come on here and you're just like bringing up all these other issues and stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
it's been a wonderful conversation, and I wanna take a question actually from our chat, from a friend of our show, Dr. Barry Gordon.
Hi, Dr. Gordon.
Yeah, he is concerned about the medical program, and conserving the medical program that we worked so hard to develop here in Florida. What do you think the best way to conserve that program would be?
Well, Dr. Gordon's spot on when it comes to, and I alluded to this earlier, but I wasn't as specific. So I really appreciate Dr. Gordon for elevating this point about patient access, because the reality is that there are still patients in Florida who cannot afford access to medicinal cannabis. I mean, we have not just a bureaucratic system that includes red tape around getting a card, but there's a cost associated to that. And it is oftentimes cost prohibited for different vulnerable populations. So in the past, we have filed legislation amendments to make access to a medicinal cannabis card less restrictive and also just more cost effective and providing exceptions for different vulnerable populations, including veterans with PTSD and other types of community groups. And I think that tax point is a really good one too. For folks who are accessing any type of medicine, you really need to be critical of taxation. And I serve as the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, and it should be noted that Florida has one of the most regressive tax structures in the country. And what I mean by that is we rely heavily on use tax, also known as sales tax. compared to other states that have more diverse revenue generators. So one reason why folks love living in Florida, moving to Florida, is that we don't have a state income tax. However, state income tax means without it, it means you have to rely on other types of revenue generation. And so sales tax becomes our main source. And sales tax charges everyone the same. So when you are a person of low income, you unfortunately end up paying more in taxes of your annual income every year than those who have more means. So when I go to the store and I buy, specific items, like maybe different types of clothing items, if I'm buying the same product as someone else, but I make more money than that person, the tax burden is less on me than it is on them, if that makes sense, because it's not a wealth tax, it's just a use tax. So when we try to make our tax system less regressive, you eliminate taxes on essential goods. Because at the end of the day, when you are making a decision between a luxury item or a need, then eliminating the tax on the need helps make the system less regressive and just focus on taxing the luxury items, the items they don't really need but are an add-on to your life. And one of the examples that we were able to accomplish about a year ago was eliminating the tax on diapers. So Florida was still taxing children's diapers and adult incontinence products. And after 5 years of trying, we were able to eliminate that tax. And that is about $100 million hit on the state budget in revenue generation. But again, we shouldn't be taxing essential needs. And when you eliminate those taxes, it just helps make the tax structure less regressive. So I say all of that because what Dr. Gordon's saying is that, medicinal cannabis is essential. It's not a luxury. You need this medicine for your health and well-being. So we need to be really intentional in making it less regressive, making it more accessible. And there are policy solutions that we have tried before, but obviously have not made it through the process. And so that's a priority for all of us. And I definitely appreciate the advocacy of leaders like Dr. Gordon, who are reminding all of us at the end of the day, we have patients in our state that if they don't have the ability to access these resources, it is incredibly detrimental to not just their lives, but to their lives of their families who often care for them as well. So I appreciate you being here, Dr. Gordon.
Representative, I wanted to touch on that. It's not just the issue around taxes, but you did touch on, cannabis is essential to many medical patients. And there are key pieces of legislation that have not gotten through the process. The biggest one is workers' rights. People are still getting fired from their jobs every single day, and they're doing things right. They're getting the doctor's recommendation. They're going to the licensed dispensaries, and they're still, losing their professional licenses. They're losing their livelihoods. And then we still see discrimination in the medical field. People who might go to certain pain management doctors, as soon as the pain management doc sees they're utilizing medical cannabis, they cut them off cold turkey. People are still being denied organ transplants because they choose to mitigate their symptoms with medical cannabis. So there are some serious issues. One of the big ones is parental rights. People can have their medical marijuana status used against them in a custody hearing, or even still have the child services come into their house and question whether or not they're a good parent because they need to utilize medical cannabis. These are key pieces of legislation that for the past 7 years, since we've had a medical system, have not gone through the process. And, we're talking about implementing, the adult use amendment should it pass, in November next session. These are also key pieces of legislation that we can't, miss out on. And I think the implementation bill could be a solid, vehicle for that. Right. In the sense that, well, if they're not going to hear these things, then let's stack on some amendments. But there's definitely got to be more around addressing the needs of medical patients in the state. I mean, we still have grandmothers getting kicked out of their ALFs for
I was going to say that. That was my other example was seniors who can't use their cannabis in their own living facilities, and veterans included in some federal facilities, right? So, yeah, all such great points.
Well, we have a bill for that.
It's true. Just needs to get a hearing.
Yeah, that's right. And last year, our parental rights bill, it did get filed thanks to Fentress, but it never got committee. So that is part of the issue. I mean, if we can get some kind of parity in the legislature, we can get these bills heard, because our legislators desperately need to be educated. And unfortunately, education goes both ways. For a number of times, we had educators coming to the legislature who were prohibitionists, like the
Right.
guy from who wrote that book, "Tell Your Children," who went ahead and spoke to the entire House and told them how terrible, how dangerous cannabis was as they were working on the implementation bill for Amendment 2. And so we've got to do a better job of educating the legislators first, and hopefully, eventually, we can get to educating the constituency as well. But if the legislators aren't educated, they're not going to make educated decisions. That's what it comes down to. So we have to do a better job of making certain every single legislator knows their shit.
Absolutely.
Essentially, when it comes to cannabis.
What's that guy's name?
I know
we
you and
talked about?
Carlos. You guys don't need education. I don't think too much.
No, I already know everything, dude. What's that guy? Except I'm about to ask a question. What's that guy's name that you're talking about? I forgot. I think I tried to read his last book.
Oh yeah, the author that came to the legislature.
Yeah, he recently came out with a book about, man, I'm gonna look in my freaking Kindle. But he recently came out with a book, and it like I could not read the entire thing because like it's like the prohibitionists are starting to say Kevin Sabet, his book Smokescreen basically like cites like how how legislators have been like failing on implementing, like we shouldn't vote for cannabis legalization because there's monopolies and they have poor quality to their cannabis, and like it's like all the shit that we've been yelling about is being used against us now. And
Yeah, we're talking about Alex Berenson, by the way.
Alex Berenson, okay, maybe I'm talking about somebody else, but it seems like a lot of things are being used against us that like we've been talking about forever. And like it's I'm sorry, I'm realizing I'm ranting now, and just because I'm pissed. But but it really does grind my gears, man, because I mean there would be so much good that can happen if we just like stop the bullshit and really like let go of a lot of the regulations and shit. um like this plant just needs to be legalized and like deregulated completely. And like we I don't know. Kano, you say something.
Well, and I'm looking forward to next week's show because I'm in the process of putting together a research around who has a better track record on cannabis, because there's become a pissing match in the cybersphere now, but whether or not Trump or Biden is better on cannabis. And I gotta say, Biden is the first president in since prohibition began that has actually taken any steps to move cannabis off the schedule. But somehow people want to give Trump all this great props for criminal justice reform. And I started counting the number of cannabis prisoners, and I'm like, Trump pardoned like 16. Or gave clemency to 16. Biden's up to like 11, but then Biden also issued out 6,500 pardons to cannabis prisoners. So there's definitely some stark contrast, but I think people need to educate themselves on the numbers and definitely look at the facts because Anna, as you touched on it, I just still haven't been able to get over the analogy. The Sith are in control right now. We in Florida. We live in the time of the empire. But the truth is that Democrats were much like the old republic. They ran it for so long, they became complacent, and they didn't see the rise of what was happening. And in the mid 90s, the Republicans took control, and now the Republicans have had 2000, 2010, and 2020 censuses to gerrymander the state to where it is today, to where it's leaning hard red, where we know Florida doesn't lean hard red. Florida is a battleground state. It is islands of blue in the cities with swaths of red, just like the rest of the country is. Your urban areas tend to be where the working class people live because jobs tend to be in the cities. They're not out in the country. The people who vote red, who can afford to have suburban country ranches and houses, that's the ones voting Republican in a lot of ways. And so this is where we are with where we're at in this state. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do, being, essentially the Rebel Alliance, is if we were to flip the state if we were to bring balance back, it's how would we govern? Because Anna, I am up here in Maryland working, for our union, as our political director in a triple blue state. I see the same fights we're having as a
Right.
minority in Florida. So
Right.
even when you're in power, you touched on it. It oftentimes becomes about corporations versus people, and it doesn't matter sometimes which party is in power. It's like, well, how do you like to get screwed over? Is it with or without lube? Because you're still getting screwed.
Well, and you hit on a really good point, right? Around like, what's Florida's status? Is Florida a purple state? Is it a red state? And I always like to tell folks that we're a rainbow state because we really are a microcosm of the whole country. And part of that is due to highway migration. Florida is a state that is populated by many locals, but also folks who come to us from other states, folks who immigrate from other countries, or folks who come from our island territories like Puerto Rico and others, to build a really incredible microcosm of the rest of the country. When you have I-75 bringing in folks from the Midwest and I-95 bringing folks from the Northeast, it just creates this really incredible political diversity that it reflects so many different viewpoints and perspectives. And oftentimes our electorate is driven by values more than issues. And I actually think that our values are very connected. This is a state that cares about freedom and liberty, access to medicinal cannabis, access to recreational cannabis, decriminalization of cannabis. Those are all issues of freedom and liberty. Those are issues of keep government out of my private affairs. I don't want government in my bedroom. I don't want government in my house dictating what I can and can't smoke, right? So much of this ties into values of freedom and liberty. But then when you also look at it from a perspective of corporate greed, I think of populism. I think of folks who are really tired of there being, control by monopolies and by a plutocracy where people of wealth and corporations of wealth have the most influence in our affairs. And it doesn't reflect a populist mentality where working class people who are the backbone of this economy, the backbone of this country, don't get a say and don't see the benefits of their labor, right? We all pay taxes, yet we don't see the results of that. We don't see strong transportation options, safety nets, accountability of property insurance and other types of insurance. And so people get angry, and rightfully so. And that reflects in how they vote. And so
I just got angry.
Yeah, I mean, I think Florida, but I think what's so I don't know, remarkable about that, right, is you see it in our voting patterns. I mean, the same year that Florida voters supported a $15 minimum wage was the same year that Trump won Florida. And Trump and the Republican Party has been aggressively against a $15 minimum wage. I mean, one of the leading voices against it was Republican Party Florida and the Florida Chamber. And yet it still won, right? And so a lot of folks who voted for Trump voted for a $15 minimum wage. And I think it speaks to how folks don't always vote by party. They're often voting by their values, but it's really important for us to unpack issues from a values-based lens.
Well, later on, you'll have to explain to me why DeSantis feels that Florida has to be responsible for the southern border. I mean, we don't need a wall. We've got a pretty damn good moat, right?
Right.
And yet,
right. I mean,
we have to go to Texas to help them out with theirs. That makes
I know. I mean, that just goes back to, again, what is
sense to me, run by these various culture wars.
Yeah. I mean, fear mongering is a powerful tool. I mean, we saw that with the hemp bill, right? It was just mentioned that one of the reasons why Democrats voted for the hemp bill was fear. It was, hey, we're got to keep our kids safe. We got to keep the public safe. And of course, you need safety regulations, and there are safety regulations in place. They can always be strengthened, but it doesn't mean to ban everything, or you know what I mean? But fear is a very powerful tool for mobilization. And it's not one that I like to practice. I prefer hope and inspiration, but fear moves people. And, the fact that former President Trump told his Republican members of Congress not to support what was a bipartisan immigration package because it was going to make it harder to campaign off, right, as an issue, speaks to what's really broken in the American political system, where we are choosing to campaigning over a good policy. And that is such a shame to the people of this country who elect people to serve their best interests, not to try to claw for power over politicized issues.
You know, I want to say Trump talks about, rapists and drug dealers coming into this country, and then people are losing their jobs. And I got to say, if rapists and drug dealers are coming to this country illegally, what the fuck do you do for a living that you're afraid you're going to lose your job? Hey, you got the joke. You got the joke, Gary. It's sensationalism at its worst. It's demagoguery at its worst. It's fear mongering at its worst. And I'm glad that we have a refreshing breath of air. Having millennials govern like yourself makes all the difference in the world, because we do have hope. We do have optimism. I just turned 40, and I'm starting to lose that optimism a little bit, because now I have a son, and I worry about the world that he's being left, that he's coming into. And simply because of the fact that you have someone like a former president who's running right now, saying they want to revoke the 14th Amendment, that my son doesn't deserve to be an American, and there are definitely some major concerns with the demagoguery that we have. And this race, for everything that and I got to concede to say this to people, for everything we hate about the system and both sides, you still have to make a choice. Everybody at a certain point has to make a choice, whether it's now or whether it's right on November 5th at the 12th hour at 7:59 p.m. bubbling in your bubble on the ballot box. But whatever that may be, you got to make a choice, and the choice you make is going to affect this country's policies and the state policies for a very, very long time. There are Supreme Court justices that are essentially going to be on the ballot. There is reproductive rights in this country, which are under attack. They're on the ballot. Cannabis consumers, rights are on the ballot. There are so many things on this ballot that it's so much more than and I don't want to shit talk people, but Trey Parker and Matt Stone called it best. When your choices are between a giant douche and a turd sandwich, people become disillusioned with the process, and people don't want to participate. But I say to you watching out there, get off the couch and participate. You got to get out there and vote. And I'm glad that Amendment 3 is on the ballot, because it gives people who typically don't want to participate an issue to go out and vote for. Even if you don't like the people on the ballot, there are people down ballot like yourself, Representative, that we need in the legislature. There are some great people that we need to put into the Senate. I'm glad that our friend and colleague Carlos Guillermo Smith is going to the Senate, because Carlos, as you pointed out earlier, we need people in the Senate who aren't just going to bow to fear mongering, and people who can be educated and make those decisions, and people that we don't have to educate that already get it. And so I'm glad that we have you, and I'm glad that you came on the show today, Representative. And I just want you to close this out by telling folks how they can support. And then also just whatever message you have to the voters, this November.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again so much for having me, and for your work in helping to not only talk about these really important issues, but break the stigma around cannabis, and help educate the greater public, and use your small business as a platform too. I think all of that is just so incredible, and really grateful to have been invited to share space with y'all. And of course, you can learn more about us at our website, which is on the banner here, onforflorida.com. That's also our social media handle. So if you want to stay updated on Florida politics, we use our Instagram platform very much just to kind of share news and information about elections. So we're at Anna for Florida and all the main social media platforms. And of course, you have the August elections coming up, which are very important. So on July 21st at 8 p.m., we're going to be hosting a virtual event on our Facebook and Instagram platform, helping folks walk through their ballot to better understand how to research candidates. And we'll also answer any questions about, different races you might not be familiar with. And then, of course, we'll do the same thing for November. So we really do believe firmly in educating our communities, and invite you to be a part of that effort.
And with all due respect, I hope fear drives people to vote yes on 4.
We need everyone to vote yes on 4. Absolutely. 100%.
Your Instagram lives are very informative. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I believe, Kato, it's time for the news, isn't it?
Indeed.
Let's do this.
Well, just started at the top of the news here, looking at some recent surveys that have come out according to data from Health Canada. If Gary would stay out of the Funyuns while I'm doing the news, is that a consumer reports drinking less alcohol following changes to marijuana's legal status. They looked at nearly 1/4 of those who consume both alcohol and cannabis say that they are drinking less, up from 15% in 2020. Canada legalized the retail sale of marijuana to those 18 and older in 2018. Separate data compiled by market research from the firm Numerator reports that 36% of U.S. consumers acknowledge drinking less following state-level marijuana legalization. In a state like Florida, where we have such an issue with drunk driving, and definitely with alcoholism, adult use could actually bring some benefits. We've seen adult use also help with retail home sales and such, in increasing home values. So there's a lot to be said about the benefits of adult use to counteract a lot of the crazy propaganda that we hear coming out of Governor DeSantis's office in trying to condemn adult use. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Democratic Governor Wes Moore signed an executive order in mid-June that pardoned over 175,000 Maryland residents with misdemeanor marijuana-related convictions. The pardon action automatically forgives every misdemeanor marijuana possession charge the state of Maryland's judiciary can locate in the state's electronic court record system, along with every misdemeanor paraphernalia charge the use or possession of marijuana. Hundreds of thousands of Americans unduly carry the burden and stigma of a past conviction for behavior that most Americans, a growing number of states, no longer consider to be a crime. Maryland actually legalized its adult use cannabis market in 2023. And, we've seen other governors do this. Massachusetts Democratic Governor Maura Healey issued a similar pardon proclamation. And in recent years, the governors of several states, including Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, Illinois, and Washington, have granted over 100,000 pardons to those low-level marijuana convictions. What we need to see here ideally is to continue to fight. With Amendment 3, should it pass, the next step is for the Florida legislature to address this issue, that since it's no longer a crime, we need to help people with this stigma in regards to criminal justice reform and clearing out those records. I do want to be clear, though, and Normal stance is clear as well on this. Pardons are not expungements. And that's what we really need in this country. And we need in this state is we need legislators, we need elected officials to move forward with expungements so people can have clean records. If we're going to have someone with 34 felonies be eligible to be president, then maybe we need to take the felon box off of the, job applications. Just, something to throw out there in the sphere. But I want to say one big breaking news story, and I'm so happy to report on this. Shout out to Raw Rolling Papers, founded by Josh Kesselman. Raw has decided to support Normal nationwide in our efforts for cannabis legalization by donating $50,000 to our efforts at National Normal. And this is definitely going to be something that we're going to utilize to improve the lives of responsible cannabis consumers. And I think Normal and Raw partnering together is just an awesome partnership. And moving forward, I would love to see maybe Normal branded Raw papers. So shout out to Josh for coming through and supporting our efforts of trying to legalize America. So, and that's all I really got on this holiday weekend for the Normal news.
Well, let me just put out here, and you can put this on Instagram and blast it as far as you want. Governor Moore, we want you on this show. Because in Florida, we have an expression, why did the armadillo cross the road? Just to show it could be done. Well, we want you to be the armadillo in this particular instance and come on the show and explain to us how it can be done for the state of Florida, because our legislature needs guidance. The branch needs a lot of guidance. And we're hoping you'll come on the show. I will be speaking to your communications person very soon. If not, call me.
I'm sure Governor Moore would tell you it's very easy to when you have a Democratic legislature and a Democratic Senate, for a Democratic governor to get what he wants. So Ron DeSantis, on the other hand,
now you're talking minor things.
Ron DeSantis, on the other hand, he's going to have to be bold. And that's the thing. is that we've seen that populism, works in a lot of ways. People want to have someone they can relate to in office. And so, if you have the ability to wield power like Governor DeSantis does with his own party and control the House and Senate, use your power for, to help the greatest amount of people, not to enrich corporations, not to enrich the guys in the country clubs, but to help working people. He can do something big by pushing for workers' rights for medical cannabis patients this next legislative session. Choosing not to is the issue that I have with him, not addressing it. Because Carlos and I sat there with his legislative team, when he first got elected, and we told him these are the things that need to happen in this state. These are the issues that medical cannabis patients are facing. And Carlos, tell the people at home what his team looked like. They looked like deer in headlights. Like they had no clue what we were talking about. They didn't care.
Looked like the best. The word Aryan comes to mind. Blonde, blue eye. Just looking at us like we're dirty. Had no idea what we were talking about. Pretended to write notes and got us the hell out of their office.
There is nothing more frustrating than participating in the political process and being dismissed. Gary, I know you feel it because you've been walking down those halls, and as soon as they turn their heads and they see you, they're bucking the other direction, or senators are ducking out those secret doors that they have to their offices, in the Senate building. It's just it's sad because
no, it's Stein.
Yeah, it's Gary Stein.
I know where the doors are, though.
Yes. That's why we got to use the smoke out technique. We send one group that way, and Gary waits by that door for him to try and peek out.
There used to be a button on the inside of the elevators where you could stop the elevator and force them to talk for a while. They took that button out.
Oh man. Well, look, all in all, we jest, we make jokes on the show, but we tackle a lot of serious topics. And I think it's important for those of you out there who want to hear more about these topics and hear great guests like Representative Eskamani, like we had last week with former Senator Brandis.
They're on the phone.
Absolutely. We need you to hit that like button on YouTube. We need you to hit that subscribe button. We're going to continue to grow our social media channels. If you're watching us on Twitch, or definitely hit like and subscribe. If you're on X, Twitter, repost this. Hit that heart. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and give us a like, leave a comment. But each and every week, 11 o'clock Eastern time, we're here, having these shows, making sure that you, the public, can be educated on the latest in cannabis news, entertainment, and of course, public policy.
Yeah.
And if you're on Pornhub, remember, we're not on Pornhub,
YouTube
so you have no reason to be there.
That's right. We do not sign. That's one channel we do not simulcast on.
Maybe we should.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Gary seems to want it pretty bad. I don't
well,
know.
Hugh Hefner was the founding what was it, donor of Normal. So Normal in the adult industry kind of have a interesting history together.
You know what? I'm gonna go by the name Mike Concho.
You sure that's not copyrighted?
Seriously though, our YouTube channel. I think it's very important that we work to improve our YouTube channel. Shout out to our current audience. They're very dedicated, quick with commenting during the live broadcast. It's a small audience, but if you hit that subscribe button, if you hit that like, if you share our videos, it really helps us out and could potentially bring another form of money coming into our organization. So focus on that YouTube, guys.
Now, I know that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have at least one NPA candidate, which is Florida's attempt at having an independent candidate means no party affiliation. I always say NPA means not possible A. You can fill in the A whatever you want, because I don't know. Chris, when was the last time an NPA actually got into office in the legislature in Florida?
I don't recall one actually, Gary. I mean, I'm 40 years old and I've been voting for the last 22 years. I can't recall a non-party affiliate. I mean, usually when you have a non-party affiliate in office, they tend to be a Republican or Democrat who become disillusioned with their party, but still have a big enough following, and then they end up switching parties. Next election. Charlie Crist is a prime example. But we don't have that many in Florida that I can recall ever, which is interesting in the sense that there are certain districts that are highly gerrymandered that one party or another could never win. So NPA candidates, if they can motivate, the other party, and they can pull enough, popular support. But again, the money in politics is where a lot of it comes down to. There are a lot of well-meaning, non-party affiliated candidates that run for office that struggle simply because they don't have $1 million to dump into a race. And the crazy part about it is that you would have to dump, close to that much to win as a non-party candidate in a lot of these races. It's just for a job that pays $30,000 a year. So, unless, being in the legislature as a rich guy is a hobby that you want, it is going to be difficult for a lot of non-party affiliated candidates to win anything. The party structure does bring a lot of value to any campaign in that, in a general election, they got down ballot slate cards that are passing out. There's events that can help up candidates' profiles with the national level candidates or state level candidates campaigning. And so there's a lot to be said of the value of being a member of a political party, in Florida. And the other thing is that Florida has closed primaries. In that you can only vote in a primary election for if you're a member of a political party for those parties' candidates. So non-party affiliated voters aren't getting to say so in essentially the two choices that they often have if there is no NPA candidate running in an election. So if you have just a Republican, just a Democrat running head up, there's a swath of voters in the state who are non-party affiliated who don't even get a say so in who those candidates are that are running. And I'm a big advocate for primaries and for open primaries in this state. I think everybody should have a right to choose, who's going to be their two choices, at the end of the line. And I get a lot of flack for that from folks within my own party. But the truth is that we need better choices in the grand scheme of things. And so, we'll see how things shake out. Another thing that irritates me is Florida has these voter take all primaries. So someone doesn't even have to win a majority of votes to be their candidate on the ballot. You can basically walk away. Some of these races have 6 and 7 people running, and you could get 15% of the vote and be the candidate. And then if it's in a gerrymandered district, you're on cruising to victory in November. So we have a lot to do to reform our political structure in the state of Florida and in this country. And so if you want to stay educated and up to date on a lot of those issues, surprisingly, turning to the cannabis show, The Rotation, is one place where you'll get that education. So like, subscribe, follow us, and share, and tune in each and every Sunday.
And remember, you don't have to have a party affiliation to be a member of Suncoast Normal.
That is right. We don't
How's
care.
that for a segue?
We don't care how you identify on the political spectrum. If you are down to support the rights of cannabis consumers, by all means, become a member. This is one of the things that we actually struggle with as a national organization. We're victims of our own success. Half the country has access to legal cannabis now. So we see memberships dwindling because people don't need to pool their resources to fight. But the truth is that there are so many more issues that we need to address. The fight is not over. Even once we pass Amendment 3 and you have access to adult use, like I said, there's still the issues of having your right to work under attack. There's still your parental rights that are under attack. There's the issue of whether or not you can grow it, where you can smoke it. So, being a member of Normal has much value. And again, we need to continue to grow our membership. So visit our website, become a member of Suncoast Normal, join National Normal, because again, the fight is not over for the civil rights of cannabis consumers in this country.
And all you got to do really is just scan that QR code right over there that I'm pointing to, and it'll take you right there to the page, and we'll make it easy. What do you get, Gary, if you become a member?
Well, you get a fabulous gold cannabis pin you can wear on your lapel to Publix and start conversations in the checkout line because people will look at that and they say, "Hey, like your pin, man." I said, "Well, in that case, have I got an amendment for you?" That kind of situation. And
Yeah,
of course, you'll be a card carrying member and you get a discount over at Chillum at 17 foot 7 over in Ybor City,
You sure do.
courtesy of Chillum. And of course, you help us with the fight. Even if Amendment 3 passes this year, we are going to have to fight for you to have public use of that amendment. That has to be in there. It wasn't in there. We have to have more people coming into the industry. That was partially in there, but enough for the legislator to screw it up. So, regardless of how it comes out this year, we will still have our work ahead of us, and we will be there with you, and you need to be with us.
I think a testament to how politically active we are is the guests on the show. I mean, we wouldn't have guests like Anna Eskamani or Brandis or and all the great guests that we've had on the show. Shows that we have some sort of communication with these people.
We have congressmen on our show.
Yeah,
yeah, with candidates for governor on the show. I think that the Suncoast Normal is really the resource that a lot of legislators turn to when they don't want an industry opinion about things, that they want an honest, intellectual, consumer rights driven opinion when it comes to what's happening in Florida and across the country. I can't tell you how, the amount of news interviews that we get a request for each and every month, and how people, turn to us for a voice that can make it happen. I mean, matter of fact, Carlos, we did an interview on public radio on Friday. And both separately were called up to do that. You didn't call us together.
About that interview too is that it's done. Like the show is done by journalists. It's done by people that are writing about politics in the state. And it seemed like they admitted that one thing that they do to make sure that they know about cannabis is watch this show. So shout out to Ray Roa and Mitch Perry, fans of the show.
Indeed. Ironically, even law enforcement watches this show. I recall in 2017 going before the Lakeland City Council to advocate for decriminalization, and Grady Judd actually quoted us on some of the things that we say on the rotation. So shout out to Grady for being a fan of the show too.
That means that you got a picture on foam core in his collection.
which is why I do not drive through Polk County with any type of cannabis.
So I think that's it, guys. I think we've had a full and interesting and wonderful show today. I can't think. Do you guys have anything that?
Well, I got my Hugh Hefner pipe here, and I'm going to utilize it as soon as we sign off because I need it.
Well, I'll say this much. Amendment 3 is definitely an issue that folks have a lot of questions on, and we're going to be striving to bring you a digital town hall in early August. We actually have a board meeting a little bit after this to finalize the dates and carrying that out. But stay tuned because Suncoast Normal will be hosting a digital town hall around Amendment 3 where you can get all the facts with none of the bias from the industry.
Yeah, I just opened up communication with that campaign, and they promised me. I can go out on the record here and say that they promised me that they're going to be there, and they're going to have an influence there and answer all the questions open and honestly.